Discover the touching moment a billionaire heir transformed after being exposed by love at work. Nate Sinclair paced the sleek, glass-walled hallways of Sinclair architecture, the empire built by his father, a giant looming over his every decision. Despite his designer shoes and tailored suits, Nate felt like a ghost in a world of opulence, the chatter of his ambitious colleagues a stark contrast to the deafening silence inside his head. Each day began with an unshakable weight, a constant reminder of the expectations he could never seem to meet. In the glitzy realm of building skyscrapers and closing multi-million-dollar deals, Nate craved more than mere numbers and charts, he craved meaning. Today, as he stood hunched over his drawing board, the hum of endless deadlines intertwined with anxiety. The looming project loomed like a specter, while his father's voice echoed in his mind, demanding more, always more. Conflict coursed through him like an electric current. He felt undeserving of the inheritance, as if every penny was a string tying him to a legacy he couldn't write. Just then, Emma burst into the office, her sunlit energy cutting through the monotony. "Nate, we've got to talk about the elevation proposal," she said, determination igniting her presence. As he looked into those earnest eyes, something stirred inside him, an urge to break free from the gilded cage. "Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue." They pored over sketches, Emma's passion igniting a fire within him. With every shared idea, he felt a bond forming, something far removed from the cutthroat corporate world. She wasn't bound by silver spoons or expectations, she was fueled by a dream, each stroke on paper revealing the promise of potential. Yet, as admiration deepened, so did fear. What if she saw through him? The weight of his inheritance felt heavier. Still, he was drawn to her, he craved a purpose that eluded him. Just as he contemplated stepping into the unknown, news of a sudden family crisis rocked his world. The lucrative firm had ties to unethical practices laid bare in a gripping exposé. Nate's heart raced, an internal tempest brewing. Betrayed by the man he idolized, reality flipped upside down, twisting the fabric of who he believed himself to be. Questions churned relentlessly. Was he complicit? Did he truly want this position? Did he owe his family loyalty, or could he redefine what it meant to honor them? Tension knotted in his stomach, and with Emma at his side, the weight of decision pressed upon him: fight for reform or succumb to the well-trodden path of privilege? As he gazed into Emma's eyes, alive with resolve, Nate felt the stirrings of rebellion rise in him. Would he risk everything to challenge the family's legacy? The clock ticked, echoing the urgency of his decision, hanging heavy in the air. As the city bustling around them blurred into a tide of uncertainty, Nate stood at the precipice ready to leap, yet terrified to let go. The familiar competing voices in his head spun recklessly, leaving him poised at the edge of a life-altering choice, drenched in mounting tension, the world waiting just outside. A heavy silence enveloped Nate as he finally tore his gaze from Emma's determined eyes, feeling the weight of their shared moment. Here was a woman who believed in a vision beyond glass towers and marble lobbies. She believed in purpose. Nate's instincts clashed with the shouts of his legacy, a storm brewing inside him that demanded action. "Emma," he started, his voice barely above a whisper, what if we went public about the findings?" The words spilled from him, spiraling into the abyss of possibility. The idea of embracing transparency felt exhilarating yet terrifying, an urge to break free from the suffocating grip of inherited expectations. Emma's brow furrowed as she processed his proposition. "Nate, are you sure? That could mean dismantling everything your family built." Her hesitance mirrored his internal struggle. The ingrained sense of duty clashed violently with the desire for integrity. He couldn't ignore the consequences of such a decision, especially for the family he had loved and now doubted. "Everything they built might not be worth preserving if it's all built on lies," he replied, searching her face for affirmation. The tremor in his voice betrayed more than just fear, it was the flicker of hope igniting within him. That's a brave stance, but this goes beyond you and your family. It's about the people affected by those practices. Ethics means more than just a name on a company sign, Emma reminded him, her sincerity cutting deeper than any critique he had ever received. Her words awakened a latent self-awareness. He was acutely aware of how privilege had shielded him from the harm his family had caused. Nate's mind raced, torn between stepping into the light and retreating into the shadows of the past. He believed in Emma, in the authenticity she brought to their work, but how could he discard everything he had been taught to value? The prospect of losing his father's legacy loomed threateningly. Who would he be without the wealth, the status, the power? As they brainstormed potential plans for addressing the ethical breach, Nate began sketching, his hand moving almost instinctively. The lines and shapes started to breathe as he put pen to paper, almost rebelling against the legacy's stringent formality that had shaped him. He was invigorated, the creative essence rising to the surface, reminding him of what truly mattered, expressing himself authentically. What if we launch a campaign for ethical design in architecture? He suggested, excitement leveling the tension within him. With every word, he felt liberated, as if shedding invisible chains. We could advocate for transparency in how we source materials, how we treat labor. We could use our position to promote social responsibility. Emma's eyes lit up, her enthusiasm radiating. That's revolutionary, Nate. It could set the standard for the industry. It's what we should stand for. They exchanged ideas, a newfound synergy blossoming as they fleshed out the possibilities, each word an affirmation of Nate's growing conviction, yet lurking beneath the surface was an undeniable anxiety. Was he truly prepared to take this leap? To stand against the tide of his family's legacy? The enormity of the choice was overwhelming, but deep down, Nate sensed this path was where he could find not just purpose, but himself. The late afternoon sun dipped lower, stretching shadows across the office floor as Nate took a deep breath, fortifying himself against the uncertainty ahead. It's time to confront what I've always feared. As he turned to Emma, he felt a shiver of resolve wash over him. The fight for integrity had ignited, and he was ready to take his stand, but the question nagged at him: would he find the courage to face the demons lurking within his family, or would he falter at the last moment, surrendering to fear as he always had before? The dawn of the next day brought a sense of urgency that crackled in the air as Nate entered his office. He had spent the night mulling over his decision, oscillating between excitement and dread. Today would not simply be another day at the helm of the family business, no, today felt like the beginning of an entirely new chapter. He stared at the same polished mahogany desk that had witnessed the transactions of power and influence, the weight of expectation pushing down on him. Each trophy and plaque lining the shelves represented his family's achievements, but they now felt like chains holding him captive. There was Emma's voice, her unwavering belief in the potential for change, echoing in his mind. As he thumbed through the latest reports of the firm's projects, a familiar panic knotted in his stomach. These reports outlined deals that made his family rich but also revealed their exploitative practices. The legacy he had inherited was stained, bearing the marks of prosperity built on unscrupulous decisions. With each line he read, the rift between his family's values and his burgeoning morality widened until it felt insurmountable. Dread washed over him as he considered the consequences of making his findings public. What would become of his relationship with his father, his idol who had poured his life into constructing this empire? Nate's heart thrummed painfully in his chest as his mind grappled with the looming confrontation. A muted knock at the door startled him from his thoughts. It was Emma, her eyes bright yet layered with concern. "I've been thinking about the next steps for the campaign." Nate stood up, forcing a smile through the storm of emotions. "Me too. I think it's time to make a proposal to the board." "Are you ready for that?" Emma asked cautiously, searching his face for any sign of the turmoil he felt within. The question sat heavily between them. "I have to be. I need to know that I can rise above fear, that I'm not just my father's shadow." A wave of determination washed over him. It was time to confront not just his father's legacy, but his own identity. "We can prepare for the meeting together," Emma suggested, an air of optimism in her tone, though her posture conveyed a hint of apprehension. As they brainstormed actionable steps, Nate felt a collective excitement build in the room, an energy that outweighed the apprehension gnawing at him. Drafting a plan to present their findings to the board ignited a spark within him. He could see beyond his family's constraints. Ideas flowed as they mapped out practical strategies for implementing ethical measures within their architecture projects. Yet, amid the exhilaration, the reality of his decision loomed large. Nate knew there would be repercussions, powerful forces working to silence his voice. Would this price be too high? Would his father's wrath lead to an irrevocable break between them? With every deliberate mark made, he felt the gravity of his choices and the tether of his legacy becoming increasingly taut. Suddenly, Nate stopped, a sobering thought cleaving through his earlier fervor. What if they don't accept this? What if they decide to blackball us? What if they do? Replied Emma fiercely, her eyes narrowing. What if you use your voice to reshape not just your future, but also ours? This is about more than completion, it's about redemption. Nate inhaled deeply, understanding the truth woven in her words. For the first time, he began to see not just a campaign, but a moral redemption, a chance to redefine who he was beyond his lineage. His heart swelled with conviction, but the shadow of doubt still loomed. As they finalized the proposal, Nate's thoughts raced ahead. The meeting with the board would soon arrive, and he had to confront the unrelenting weight of familial expectations. He was on the precipice of significant transformation, and yet the chokehold of legacy threatened to pull him back into the shadows, and just as the gravity of his challenge began to settle, a message pinged on his phone. It was a notification from a news outlet about an impending investigation into his family's practices. Nate's blood ran cold. The time to act was quickly dwindling. Could he muster the courage to publicly align with the truth, or would he let fear dictate his destiny once again? Nate sat in his office, the weight of recent revelations pressing down on him like a physical presence. The news had shattered the fragile barriers he had built around his mind. An investigation into his family's practices was no longer just a rumor, it was imminent, a looming storm threatening everything he had ever known. How could he possibly reconcile this with the path he intended to take? He glanced at Emma, who was still reviewing their meticulously crafted proposal. Even as uncertainty gnawed at him, he couldn't help but feel buoyed by her unwavering support. Her composure was a beacon in this chaotic moment, reminding him that he was not entirely alone in this fight. "We can still present the proposal," he said, his voice steadying with determination. "If there's a storm brewing, we expose the truth on our terms." Emma caught his gaze and nodded, a flicker of admiration passing between them. They both understood the stakes. Failure would mean not just personal ramifications for Nate, but also a potential dismantling of everything his father had built, and that reality weighed heavily on his conscience. Yet, the more he contemplated this, the clearer it became that aligning with the truth could be his only way forward. In the hours leading up to the board meeting, Nate found himself pacing his office with relentless fervor. The proposal they had drafted was more than just a strategy for ethical reform, it was an attempt to rewrite a narrative that had ensnared him for too long. It embodied not only their findings but the potential for a redeemer's justice, a correction to the moral compass that had been lost in his family's obsession with wealth and power. Yet, the specter of confrontation with his father loomed. He could hear his father's voice in his head, the clarion call of tradition drowning out the whispers of his own emerging values. How could he defy a man who had sacrificed so much to build this legacy? Could he really stand defiant in the face of familial loyalty? Moments before the meeting, he stepped outside for a breath of fresh air. The crispness of the morning contrasted sharply with the muddled thoughts in his mind. Each deep inhale brought clarity, and each exhale released the doubt. He realized he was not simply trying to defend a proposal, he was seeking to redefine his own narrative, to take ownership of who he was meant to be, rather than allowing his father's legacy to define him. Returning inside, the boardroom felt charged with a palpable tension. Nate's heart thundered in his chest as he faced the glinting eyes of board members who had counseled against such changes. This was the moment where words would become more than mere challenges, they would be a declaration of his newfound identity. With the proposal rolling off his tongue, Nate could see the flicker of surprise and disbelief in his colleagues' reactions. One voice rose above the rest, a seasoned board member known for her loyalty to his father. "You're willing to disrupt everything for what, Nate? A fleeting sense of righteousness?" Nate met her gaze, and the conviction he felt surged anew. "For the viability of a future that aligns with genuine values. Is the price of our past worth the sacrifice of our future?" His declaration hung in the air like a challenge, confronting old loyalties with a newfound resolution. Emma's reassuring smile bolstered his courage. As voices began to rise in defensive rebuttal, a figure stepped forward to silence the room. It was his father. The atmosphere thickened, emotions teetering between fear and hope. This was the moment of reckoning he had both dreaded and longed for. "What you have to say, Nate, will affect us all," his father's voice rang out, cutting through the buzzing anticipation like a knife. "Let us hear it." And just as Nate opened his mouth to respond, he realized the confrontation he had been preparing for was now upon him. Would he stand firm in his newfound identity, or would he falter under the weight of parental expectations? The outcome lingered terrifyingly uncertain. Nate could feel the air grow thick with expectations as his father's penetrating gaze bore down upon him. In that instant, every doubt, every fear surged within him. He had never expected the confrontation to come with so many eyes watching, yet it was precisely in this very spotlight that he felt his resolve harden. This was more than the defense of a proposal, it was about challenging a legacy that threatened to chain him to a past he no longer believed in. "I've realized," Nate began, his voice firm even amidst the cacophony of discontent, "that change is not only necessary, it is inevitable. If we do not adapt, if we do not align our values with the changing landscape of our society, we risk losing everything." He searched the faces in the room for understanding, but found mostly disbelief and anger. His father's expression shifted, cooling into a tight mask of control. "You think the world operates on ideals alone? We are in the business of legacy, son. Embracing change is one thing, dismantling what's been built is another." The juxtaposition of conviction and disappointment ripped through Nate. Did his father truly believe that wealth was the ultimate measure of success? Was power so intoxicating that it blinded him to the ramifications of their actions? "But at what cost, Dad?" Nate pressed. "We cannot sacrifice the well-being of others for our gain. It isn't just business, it's life, and lives are at stake here." As Nate's words echoed in the room, an unsettling silence spread over the board members. A glimmer of something shifted in Nate's chest, and unexpected confidence began to unfurl, fueled by his commitment to not remain a bystander in his own life any longer. He was done being shackled by expectations that stifled his voice. His father's face scrunched in anger, a flicker of hurt hidden beneath the storm. "You're acting as if you alone hold the truth. What you see as necessary is naive, a betrayal of everything I taught you." The accusation stung, but instead of shrinking away, Nate leaned into the discomfort. "What I see," he declared, fiercer than before, "is the rot beneath the surface, something you have turned a blind eye to in the name of preserving a legacy. I'm willing to take the risk and face the consequences, not just for our family, but for the future of this company." Emma, sitting in her corner of the room, nodded ever so slightly in encouragement. She recognized the critical juncture Nate was at, one where personal stakes mixed with ethical responsibility collided in a head-on clash. "You talk of principles," Nate continued, "yet when did profit become the only principle that matters?" The senior board member who had initially objected to Nate's proposal interjected, her voice trembling with uncertainty. "But what happens if this all fails? What if your ideals lead us to ruin?" Nate felt the room's collective breath hold, and he took a moment, measuring his response carefully. "Then we would have the chance to rebuild, grounded in integrity instead of greed. At least we would have faced this truth together." His words hung in the air, defying the fears that sought to drown them. Nate realized he was not defending a proposal, he was defending both his future and the future of the people within these walls. He had to trust that this moment of vulnerability, this assertion of his newfound principles, would resonate deeper than tradition. As he stood there, feeling the weight of his words, he sensed a crack in the dam of his father's posture, a shift that hinted at more than just opposition. For the first time, there erupted within him the undeniable conviction that he might actually be able to create a path forward not just for himself, but for an entire company steeped in a problematic legacy. "I know this is a pivotal moment for us all," Nate concluded, his heart racing as he took a breath. "Decide whether we're a company that embraces transformation or one that is destined to be washed away by the tide of change. I refuse to stand idly by any longer." For a heartbeat, silence reigned. Then came a fractured murmur among the board members, the kindling of rebellion, of voices questioning the status quo, igniting a flame of possibilities. Yet, through the chaos, Nate suddenly caught his father's eye, and there it was again, the pang of an unvoiced understanding, a split-second connection echoing with memories of shared moments that reminded him of who he had once been. But then, that space vanished as quickly as it came. Nate's heart sank. He had touched something deep, yet the uncertainty of what his father's retaliation could be loomed large. The time had come to face not just the board, but the emotional battle within his own family's expectations. And as Nate held his breath, waiting for his father to respond, he realized the true challenge would not just be changing the company's trajectory. It would mean confronting the very foundation of his familial ties. What would follow next could reshape everything. The room was charged with a tension that seemed almost palpable. Nate's pulse thrummed in his ears as he awaited his father's reaction. The seconds dragged on like hours, filled with the weight of unspoken words. Each eye in the room was locked onto the duo, creating an unyielding atmosphere where no one dared to utter a sound. "I've spent years building this company, my reputation, and you stand there tearing it all down." His father's vehement response shattered the silence, each word sharp and accusatory. It stung, not just in the professional sense, but personally, echoing deep-rooted fears Nate had always tried to suppress. Yet, amid the turmoil of emotions, a flicker of determination ignited within him. "It's precisely because of the legacy you built that I find it so imperative to challenge it," Nate replied, his voice unwavering. "Your success was built on practices that have become outdated, even harmful. I'm only asking we consider a new way forward, one rooted in responsibility that reflects the world we live in." For a brief moment, the haunted look in his father's eyes suggested uncertainty, a crack in the imposing facade. Nate clung to that glimmer of hope. Could this be the realization that changed everything? But then, the mask reformed, and his father's voice rose again, cold as steel. "If you think turning your back on what works is a form of strength, then you've misunderstood what it means to lead." Nate's heart sank anew, but he remained resolute. Strong leaders adapt. They don't cling to the past from fear of vulnerability. Perhaps we could focus more on innovation and sustainability rather than just revenue. If business is only about numbers, then what good is it? His last words hung heavily, invoking deep introspection within the room. A few board members nodded slightly, but Nate noticed they still hesitated, caught between allegiance to tradition and the allure of change he was presenting. The tension in the atmosphere shimmered with uncertainty, yet it also bore witness to a pivotal moment occurring. A pivotal moment for him, not just in the context of his father's legacy, but in defining who he was becoming. And then came Emma's voice, steady and refreshing in the storm. "I agree with Nate. Companies thrive because they connect with their customers and understand their evolving needs. We should actualize accountability and drive forward with purpose." The room was abuzz with murmurs, but Nate's focus shifted inward, piecing together a vision fueled by inspiration rather than fear. The confrontation, against the odds, had awakened a new depth within him, one so potent that the initial doubts began to lose their tight grip. He had entered the meeting fearing backlash. Now, he stood on the brink of a transformation that could redefine him forever. With every minute that passed, Nate understood that he was carving not just a place for himself in this corporate hierarchy, but rather charting a legacy of his own, one that began to align with his growing sense of self. He caught Emma's eye again, that silent companionship acting as an anchor in the chaos. But then, reality took hold. The murmur in the room faded and shifted to whispers of doubt. But what will happen to our current clients? Someone raised fearfully, a hint of anger rising as they questioned Nate's viability amidst risks. Nate inhaled deeply, steeling himself. The transition won't be overnight. It will take time, trust, and a willingness to face the unknown together. He hesitated, weighing his words carefully. I believe that by nurturing relationships with those who value transparency over deception, we can actually expand our horizons. But deep down, Nate's chest tightened with the knowledge that the crux of this meeting lay beyond numbers and clients. It touched the very essence of who he was expected to be, who their legacy demanded he should be. Could he truly advocate for pathway changes without alienating his father, all while asserting his autonomy? In that moment of soul-searching, the wrath in his father's eyes seemed to dim, an unexpected flicker of conflict played across his features. Nate felt the burden of that unyielding gaze, questioning whether any form of compromise could heal the rift developing between them. Before he could process his thoughts further, Nate realized he was staring at a crossroads with his father, and it terrified him. As a new wave of uncertainty washed over him, he recognized that the storm was far from over, but he had ignited the flames necessary for the battle ahead. Decisions like these don't just shift company direction, Nate dared to voice, they redefine everything, including us. Are we willing to face that together or lose everything in the name of stubbornness? With emotions crackling and hearts pumping, everyone waited for his father's decisive response that would either shatter Nate's self-discovery or unleash a powerful return to the negotiation of legacy. The truth gnawed at him as he stood on the precipice of change. Could he muster the courage to challenge everything he thought he knew, even about family? In the heart of that unspeakable tension, Nate understood the true weight of responsibility lay not just in his decisions, but in the potential to reshape their very identities. And with that realization, he braced himself for the moment he had come to fear the most, the confrontation with the man who had forged his past. Because at the end of the day, he managed slowly, I want to know that I chose to forge my own path, not just follow an old road. The words trailed off, leaving an echo in the tense silence, while Nate held his breath, hoping for something deeper, a revelation that could bind them anew, or perhaps a fracture that would change the family's timeline forever. Nate's proclamation hung in the air, an audacious challenge reverberating through the stillness of the boardroom. The silence enveloped him, a desperate plea for insight and resolution. He braced himself for his father's piercing response, but instead, the elder man's face contorted, a struggle playing out within hardened features. Understanding you want change doesn't mean I will allow you to dictate how this business should operate, his father finally retorted, voice laced with resignation and authority, a blend that ignited a fire in Nate's belly. Nate swallowed hard, wrestling with the duality of his father's words. Was he truly prepared for this battle? He stood at a precipice, but was he wrong to want more, not just for the company, but for himself, too? I'm not going to dictate, he ventured carefully. I'm offering a partnership in rebuilding this legacy. Together, we can create something that reflects our values and the society we influence. Isn't that what you always wanted to leave, not just wealth, but an impact? As the board murmured and shifted, Nate felt a surge of agency wash over him. This moment had transformed from a mere challenge to a pivotal juncture, the chrysalis where fear and courage collided to forge a new identity. His father's expression softened momentarily, and Nate saw a flicker of vulnerability. You really believe you can change the world with this company? Yes, Nate affirmed, his voice steady, a newfound boldness taking root. We can't be the schoolyard bullies of business anymore, Dad. The old playbook is expired, it's time for a fresh chapter. As tension lingered, Nate noticed Emma's supportive nod. Her confidence bolstered him. Here was someone who believed in the potential they both saw, and who dared to dream beyond comfort. Her faith anchored Nate's resolve further. Think about it, he pressed, hoping to elevate the conversation beyond the personal. We have the resources to pivot in a meaningful way. We can become thought leaders instead of followers, building a brand based on authenticity. But even as he laid out his vision, he raged internally against the myriad emotions that conflicted within him: fear of failure, fear of disappointing his father, the fear of losing what had once felt like certainty. Each thought surged like a chaotic wave, yet through this turmoil, Nate felt clarity sharpening his focus. Suddenly, the boardroom door swung open, interrupting his contemplation. A young intern stepped in, hands trembling, carrying a stack of documents. "I'm sorry for the interruption," but their voice faltered before resuming with unexpected courage. "I wanted everyone to know that I signed the petition. People here believe in what Nate is proposing." Gasps echoed and eyes shifted toward Nate, each gaze probing and analytical. The intern's words seemed to shift the atmosphere, injecting energy into the room that had crippled them before. This was no longer just a corporate charade, it could be a movement, catalyzed by the willingness of those who felt unheard. Nate felt a jolt of pride for the intern and an overwhelming sense of responsibility. If his aspirations sparked something in others, he couldn't back down. He turned back to his father, meeting the once untouchable gaze. "We have a choice: the comfort of the status quo or the risk of challenging ourselves to evolve. I choose evolution. Can you, Dad?" His father's stern exterior quivered, betraying the seismic shift brewing just beneath the surface. Nate held his breath, reading the complexities of his father's silence, battling an array of emotions that mirrored his own. Would this moment bring them closer together, or further apart into unreachable divides? In that charged silence, something vital sparked within Nate. He realized that his growth was not a solitary journey. It was intricately linked to the future he envisioned, not just in the company but in their relationship as father and son. But undisguised fear flared again. Would he be prepared to confront the alternate truth: a father who would break rather than bend? As the various emotions played out between them, Nate recognized the stakes were not merely business, they were foundational and personal, calling for more than merely a professional vision. The silence stretched, a chasm ready to give way. "The time has come to face what we really want," Nate murmured, his heart racing, and with the unsaid possibilities lingering in the air, Nate understood that the next move wouldn't just determine the fate of the company but might transform the very core of their family bond. Would they find common ground or lead themselves further apart? The clock ticked, seconds feeling like lifetimes. It was a breath held tightly that could lead to a profound revelation or an impasse, and Nate wasn't prepared to lose either way. In the aftermath of Nate's bold declaration, a palpable tension gripped the room. The slate-gray walls seemed to close in as conversations fluttered uncertainly around him. Clarity flowed from within, though a tumultuous cocktail brewed just beneath the surface. He gazed intently at his father, their shared history interweaving in silence. The complexities of familial loyalty and professional ambition hung like heavy drapery. Nate inhaled deeply, ruminating on the great risk he had taken. His gut twisted at the uncertainty swirling in the air. Had he, in his pursuit for change, jeopardized the very fabric of their relationship? Yet he couldn't turn back now. He felt emboldened by his truth, which had remained dormant for too long. How could he reclaim his voice when the echoes of his father's expectations had silenced it for years? "So, Nate," his father broke the silence, his voice measured but strained. "You believe we should toss aside everything we've built and rewrite the script?" "Not entirely," Nate replied, finding conviction in impromptu moments. "I'm proposing that we expand the narrative. We've thrived on the old playbook, but the world is shifting. If we continue to operate as if nothing has changed, we risk becoming obsolete." His father's brow furrowed, each crease a remnant of battles fought, of dreams unfulfilled. The hesitation, Nate recognized, was fear of change, the kind that turns men into relics rather than visionaries. He remembered vividly the meetings where conversations had veered into veiled threats of what failure would mean. But failure was bound to happen if they clung to outdated ideals, shackling themselves to a past that no longer resonated. The murmurs in the room amplified, veering from skepticism to intrigue. Emma's presence was a steadying force, radiating an unshakable belief in Nate. He caught her eye once more, sparking a moment that infused him with more energy. It's not about tearing down what has been achieved but about layering a new foundation. We can redefine our legacy the way we conduct our business, our values, and our commitment to our people. And just who do you think we are? Some sort of social enterprise? His father shot back, disbelief coloring his tone, though a trace of surprise laced it. I think we can be both. Nate's voice surged with newfound energy. Why shouldn't we embrace innovation? We do have the capital to explore paths others fear to tread. Let us integrate sustainability, champion inclusion, and lead with authenticity. These are not just trends, they're essential to securing our future. Easy to say when you've never had to carry the weight of this company, his father countered, the steel in his voice agitating Nate further. Hurt flared in his chest, but instead of retreating, he pressed on. I've carried it, even if it felt like a shadow. I've watched and learned. He paused, grounding himself with a moment of reflection. If I don't start speaking up, how will I ever claim my share of this legacy? This is as much my fight as it is yours. The all-consuming cacophony minimized as the gravity of his words settled upon the board members. Nate felt agency surging like a tide with every passing heartbeat. It was a rallying point, there was no turning back now. His father's immovable demeanor softened for the briefest of seconds, and in that fleeting moment, Nate saw something akin to hope, flickering like a dying ember. You're talking about a complete overhaul. It's not merely a matter of choice, it's about trust. Do you really believe we can reach this new potential together? Yes, Dad, Nate breathed, determination saturating his essence. But we have to take the leap together. If you're afraid of the darkness ahead, let me be the guide. We can navigate this if we stand united. There was a silence, deep and contemplative. Nate felt the weight of that moment, a question of trust not just in the company he sought to transform, but in the father he desperately wanted to understand him, and perhaps, to comprehend his vision. What will you do if I refuse? His father's challenge cut through the heaviness, each word a pair of knives sliding deep into Nate's resolve. He hesitated, a do-or-die scenario unfurling within his mind. Would he choose to fight against familial loyalty or forge a new path therein? Uncertainty pressed heavily against his chest. I'll fight for my voice, Nate declared firmly, in this company and my life. But I pray we do it together. The boardroom held its breath again. What came next would either dismantle the foundation built on unvoiced tensions or would cultivate a new and unexpected alliance. Could this confrontation unveil the transformative strength lying dormant not just in Nate's vision but in his father's heart as well? As the clock ticked on, a simple truth lingered in the space between them, a truth begging to be unearthed. Nate's declaration hung in the air like an electric charge. As murmurings receded, he felt a duality forming, the exhilaration of potential change wrestling with the fear of rejection from the man he had looked up to for so long. Each beat of silence intensified the stakes. Finally, his father broke eye contact and redirected his gaze toward the table, scanning the faces of the board members as if seeking allies in this turning tide. Their expressions ranged from curiosity to apprehension. It wasn't merely Nate challenging the status quo, but confronting a lifetime of entrenched beliefs. Minutes dragged on, and the atmosphere thickened. Nate was keenly aware of the weight he carried, not just in regard to familial bonds but also as the embodiment of a future he wanted to carve out. Every heartbeat echoed the question, was he strong enough to stand alone if his father refused to join him? Trust, you say, his father finally muttered, forcing a brusque laugh that held no amusement. But trust is earned, Nate built on years of results, of actions guiding words. The previous facade of disbelief morphed into something sharper, something Nate felt could cut the air. Yes, Dad, but isn't it time we evolve? Nate rebutted, the urgency in his voice swelling. The world outside is demanding transparency, responsibility. People want more than just profits, they want connection. As the words spilled from him, he sensed a shift, a rhythm born out of conviction, Nate could see the nuance of understanding kissing the corners of Emma's mouth. Her confidence flowed into him, lighting a fire in his belly. They had worked late into the night, strategizing how they could innovate while maintaining their company's core values. Now, it felt like every late-night brainstorming session was converging into this singular moment. "Yes, connection," his father interjected, shaking his head as if to shake off the looming dread. "Most organizations you speak of are crumbling under the weight of their ideals. You talk of innovation, yet you risk our financial integrity." "Integrity can be a guiding principle, Dad, not just a financial term," Nate countered, his voice unwavering, his mind racing. "Think of it, a company known for its ethical backbone would attract both talent and loyalty. If our values shine, so will our profits. Isn't that the legacy we want to leave?" The board members seemed intrigued, the murmuring growing softer as Nate caught the gaze of a few. Each nod and sigh of reluctance spoke volumes, but it was his father's reaction that remained unresolved. "I worry you romanticize a dream," his father said, the weight of foreboding infused in his tone. "You hold fast to an ideal without understanding the brutal realities of business. You forget the sacrifices others have made to build this company." The challenge hung heavy between them, and suddenly, Nate's resolve flickered with hesitation. Had he truly grasped the nuances of leadership? He was passionate, yes, but was that enough? The quiet doubt crept in, faster than he could suppress it. Yet as he looked around the room, Nate recognized that within that struggle lay discovery. No longer was he merely the heir draped in expectation, he was an architect of his destiny. Standing tall before his father, he thought of the countless nights he'd spent immersed in data and strategy, learning the intricacies he'd once taken for granted. "Perhaps that's it, Dad," Nate said slowly, a new clarity forming. "I've grown. It's time for us to grow too. This isn't just my fight, it's our company's. Together, we stand stronger." In his father's eyes, Nate caught a flicker of something unmistakable, a crack in the armor. It was an opportunity shining through the storm, a bridging of generations, a meeting of perspectives. Each moment felt etched into the future, the legacy they shared about to fortify or fracture. What if the leap into the unknown leads us to failure? His father challenged, though progressively less vehement, drawn into the gravity of the moment. "I can't promise it, Nate admitted, his heart racing. "But I can promise it'll be driven by authenticity. We'll forge a different path together, a path built on trust." As the silence reigned in the room, Nate felt commitment coalescing, the kind that could rebuild bridges without disregarding history. But the challenge loomed before him. Was he willing to face not only his father's skepticism but the inherent risk of failure tied to their legacy? A deep breath filled Nate as he heard the ticking of the clock echo in the boardroom, a haunting reminder of decisions that needed to be made. Change was patient, yet unforgiving, and Nate understood that the next step might determine not just the fate of the company but the very nature of their relationship. Yet, just before he could further voice his commitment, a sudden alert on his phone buzzed violently in his pocket, shattering the fragile stillness. It was a message marked urgent, and as he glanced at the screen, dread pooled into his stomach. What revelation awaited him now? Would it be another chance to solidify his resolve, or would it jeopardize everything he had fought for? The message on Nate's phone reeked of urgency. An article had just broken, detailing the unethical practices within Sinclair architecture and naming him as the potential successor to the throne upon which the family business stood. That news could shatter everything. Could he rise to the occasion, or would it paralyze him beneath its weight? In that moment of hesitation, Nate felt the ripple of transformation fully encapsulate him. It solidified his resolve. No matter the outcome, he had accepted a fundamental truth: he was no longer willing to stand on the sidelines as his father had always expected. Instead, he was ready to embrace vulnerability and authenticity, even if it came with the potential for failure. "Dad," he began, looking straight into his father's steely gaze, "the time for half measures is over. We need to confront this situation head-on, but not as a company eager to protect reputation. We need to be a beacon of change. I cannot inherit a legacy built on shadows. I will not. His father's eyes seemed to search the depths of his soul, gauging this newfound strength. Nate could see the wheels turning in his father's mind, grappling with the implications of this transformation. What you propose is reckless, Nate, his father warned, but now, there was less sting in those words. They held the tremor of curiosity rather than outright defiance. Is it reckless to want to do what's right? Nate countered, emboldened by a tide of newfound purpose washing over him. If we face this together and present a unified front rooted in ethical practice, we can reclaim trust, not only from our clients but from ourselves. Let us redefine our legacy as one grounded in integrity. We owe it to those impacted by our past actions. A murmur spread through the room, rippling through the board members as they watched this family feud unfold into something much more impactful than a clash of wills. There was a shift in energy, almost electric. The once stifling atmosphere transformed into a fertile ground for possibility. Nate continued, people are ready for change. They are ready for connection over corporation. And I am ready to lead that effort, but I need you with me. Let us craft a new narrative together, a legacy not just built of brick and steel, but of values and trust. The silence following his words felt endless, a moment where everything lingered suspended. It was there that hope blossomed like a flower breaking through concrete, surviving against the odds. Finally, his father spoke, the weight of years of practice combined with the uncertainty of a father seeing his son prepared to step into the world he had long molded. You truly mean this, don't you? I do. And I believe we can take this leap for a better tomorrow. Together. Nate felt the beating of his heart harmonizing with those in the room, resonating with the notion of transformation, not just for Sinclair architecture but for their very identities. When at last his father nodded, a silent agreement formed. Nate understood it was not just a concession, it was recognition. Let us navigate this defining moment as a family, as partners, his father finally said, a tone of reluctant acceptance lacing his voice. We'll create a plan to address these allegations, but let us also build a strategy that aligns with the values you've articulated today. Nate felt a surge of accomplishment wash over him, the realization that he had begun the metamorphosis not just of the company, but of himself. He stood proudly, no longer merely the son of the legacy, but a shaper of its future. With a palpable sense of shared purpose in the room, Nate solidified this turning point, penning down action points together with Emma, the board members, his father standing resolutely alongside him. They utilized this moment to map out the initial steps of a campaign for ethical architecture, transparent practices that fulfilled promises not merely to the company's clients but to society itself. Nate had come full circle, evolving from feeling like a ghost in his own life to taking a bold stand for what he believed in. It was a journey inward that unveiled the true essence of leadership, understanding one's values and the willingness to advocate for them. As the meeting concluded, Nate stepped out, the crisp air bracing and invigorating. He felt that familiar weight lift off his shoulders. The chain of expectations had transformed into a road paved with purpose. The joy radiating through him was not simply the thrill of professional victory, but the triumph of self-discovery. He smiled at Emma, who met his gaze with unwavering faith, their partnership solidified by a shared mission. What's next? She asked, her eyes glimmering with excitement. It's time to redefine not just our company, but this entire industry, Nate said, feeling the whispers of possibility flowing around him. His heart soared with possibilities untold, ready for the challenges ahead. He had transformed, no longer defined by a legacy but by values and a commitment to transcend the past. The ambitions which once held him captive lay now behind him, and the future smiled brightly, inviting him onward. You need to subscribe now to our channel for more transformative journeys of personal growth. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like right now to help us reach a wider audience. We want to hear from you. Comment your thoughts, reactions, and theories about this incredible ending. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who desperately need to see this inspirational conclusion.